Good morning, everyone. My name is Amuta Chukudi. This morning, I want to tell us on how I failed in the poultry business. In 2018, I invested hundreds of thousands of naira in the broiler business, and about 6 months later, I stopped the business. Excuse me. I started as an apprentice and I learned the business, and just as I was about setting out on my own, I stopped the business. Why did I stop the business? There are two reasons. While I was learning as an apprentice from my mentor, who was very dedicated and knew the rudiments of the business, he taught me a whole lot about the business. He taught me the science of the business. I discovered two things. One, there were so many poultry farmers competing for a particular market. I observed that some poultry farmers were willing to sell even at a loss just to get their birds out. Why? They didn't want to continue to incur costs of feeding and maintaining the birds. Secondly, is this. I observed that the profit margin in the business was low, and you need to sell a very high number of birds for you to make real profit or good profit. Then, in the process of trying to sell a high number of birds, if you are not able to move out those birds at the maturity stage, you incur huge costs of keeping the birds, in taking care of them, in paying your workers, paying for feeds, high cost of feeding, and other variables to keep the birds, and other variables rather to run the farm. And in the process, you could incur huge losses, because when you are selling lesser than what you spent in training the birds or keeping them alive, you are obviously making a loss. I observed that, or rather, I would advise that before one goes into the poultry business, you should have drawn a system on how to make money from the different value chain points. This is what I mean. Selling of poultry birds is profitable if you are able to cut off the middleman, because the middlemen actually make most of the profit. The retailers make most of the profit. If you produce to retail, let's say you have a point where the birds are being killed and then processed for the customer, you will then be the one selling to your retail points, or you have frozen food stores where you can supply to your frozen food stores and customers buy. There you make profits. You can expand. You can produce for your frozen food stores. You know the amount, the number of birds, or for your retail point. It will be good and better if you combine both. You have both frozen food stores and spots where these birds are processed. By so doing, you would not have to keep your birds and feeding them with more extra capital, money from your purse, and running at a loss. Secondly, you will supply to your frozen food store and then sell at a higher price and your processing spots. So these are the two reasons people fail in business of poultry, especially broilers. One, low profit margin. Two, competition drives the cost down. The buyers, the retailers, would want to buy at a lesser price, and when you don't agree, they would go to people who would rather sell it at a lesser price and make little amount of money just because they don't want to incur the costs. And if you insist on selling at a certain price, you may end up selling at a big loss. So don't really pay much attention to the lot of things people say. Poultry is very lucrative, this and that. Do your analysis and research very well. I have written a book on this yet to be published. If you want to get to know more about what not to do before going to poultry farming, please discuss with me here. Thank you and have a nice day.